The Tao of Deep Intimacy podcast, episode number 4, Heaven Flights, with Dr. Andrew Jan.
Hey, welcome, Andrew. It's great to
Hi.
connect.
Hi, Arjuna. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled. I think it's going to be great today to talk about the whole spectrum of Master Chia's, sometimes called canon, the big body of his work. Because Catherine and I, we focus more on the healing love, on the relational sexual practices. Of course, we teach the inner smile and the healing sounds and warm-ups and things. But I think today it would be really great to give people a sense of what are the higher levels of the teachings that, move more into the kind of what Master Chia calls the enlightenment realm.
Right. Yeah, okay. Well, it sounds like we've got our session set out for us. Before we start, as you know, as you probably said in the introduction, I'm a medical doctor, I'm a medical acupuncturist, and also an adjunct clinical professor. But today I'll be wearing my Taoist teacher's hat. But it's important that I say right from the get-go that anything that we talk about today won't be medical advice. That it'll be for education and information only. And that when we talk about the high-level practices in particular, people will have to know that, each of the levels have to be done prior. So everyone does the prerequisite training, and they do that with an appropriately trained instructor. And if people are worried about things, they should probably seek professional advice before embarking on some of these practices. So I have to put that to the forefront. But other than that, I'm really looking forward to discussing the merits of these high-level practices, how it can help relationships, and maybe just an exploration of what is all these high levels about. You've talked about, I think in our preparation, that the healing love practices were level 2, and the inner smile and 6 healing sounds was level 1. And we're going to theoretically be walking all the way up to level 8 and 9, which is, the Congress of Heaven and Earth in ecstatic spirit flight, and also the grand completion, the union with the void or the Tao, and then the return home to humanity. So there's a lot to talk about in our session today. How long have we got?
Oh, that's a question I should be asking you. How long have we got? But let's see how we get on.
Let's see how we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of the people listening to this, if they've been studying already with me and Catherine, they are familiar with the inner smile. Let's just start with the inner smile. So they're familiar with that we have 5 major yin organs, which have corresponding emotions that characterize stagnation, and emotions that characterize like fullness of chi. So let's move from there to once we've done a little bit of smiling to the organs, and there is a free resource on our website to guide you through that. Let's talk a little bit about then what happens with the beginning of the fusion practices when we bring those 5 elements together.
Right. Maybe it'd be best to talk about the whole journey and then put this into context. We're on this journey from the realm of what we call the 10,000 things, which sort of leads to the fusion anyway. We're on this journey from the 10,000 things, and then we discover eventually that there is a language of nature, right? Mm-hmm. And that language of nature isn't in words, it isn't in English, it isn't in French, it's not in Ukrainian. It's in the realm of energy, and the Taoists call that the 8 forces, right? So eventually the first bit of vocabulary that people learn are the 8 forces, which you learn in the Bagua. So, Kan Li Jung Dui Kun Ken Sun Chen, or water, fire, thunder, lake, earth, mountain, and then wind and heaven. So what are these strange forces that they're talking about? But then the 8 forces come from nature, and then they talk to our bodies. and they talk to our bodies in terms of the 5 elements. And the 5 elements in the Chinese Taoist system, I mean, it's different in other alchemical systems. No one's right and no one's wrong. But with that system, the organs represent the condensation of those elements. And then from there, they make their way into, they start merging and fusing, and then they merge and fuse to form yin and yang. So there's a great binary here, the final duality. And then the final duality then merges again to give us what we call, into the mysterious paths, or the merging of these two into the door to all wonders, which is into the mystery, which is perhaps into the nothingness or the one. So when we talk about,
and that's known as Wu Qi, right?
Well, there's lots and lots of words for the final endpoint. You can call it the void. You can call it the Wu Qi.
Yeah.
Right? Or the grand nothingness. You could call it, ultimately there's the Tao behind that. Or in other traditions, it'll probably be the same word as God. It would be the same word as Brahman. It would be the same word as the great emptiness of the Buddhist tradition. It could be the Brahman of the Hindu tradition. So it's just a word. But ultimately, what we're trying to introduce into the practitioner at that level, when you talked about the organs and inner smile, is that we're trying to teach them that they're part of this grand scheme to return to God, to return to the Tao. So they're just learning, oh my God, I'm part of this grand scheme, and my body is just part of that pathway. So my organs represent the 5 elements. If I can identify these energies and dissolve my body, then I can start to feel this duality. And then maybe once I feel that duality, I can start to make my way, not necessarily to home in the first place, but to that place where everything opens up and I can see this new way of approaching life. Yeah?
Mm.
Yeah.
So when you say new way of approaching life, did you just take us all the way to the end, or are you saying
maybe I've been a bit quick.
Yeah.
So anyway, you wanted me to talk about fusion, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we'll get there. By the end of the podcast, we'll get to the void and the Wu Qi and the grand completion and spirit flight. But let's do the first bit. So the fusion meditations are about learning the language of nature and learning to feel the 8 forces. So people have to learn what water power feels like, what fire power feels like, what heaven power feels like, what thunder feels like, what lake power feels like, what wind feels like, what mountain feels like, what heaven feels like. And then they convert that into the 5 elements, and people usually understand that. What does water feel like in the body? What does wood feel like in the body? What does fire feel like in the body? What does earth feel like in the body? And what does water feel like in the body? What does metal feel like in the body? So when we go to that, that's when we start making connections to our organs. And in that process, perhaps we might lightly use the word healing here, but there's certainly dissolution of blockages, opening of the body. And the start of fusion is learning to open and dissect the body so that we can make that grand return to the duality in some respects. And that means we have to work through, we've briefly talked about in our pre-discussions about when we dissolve the body, what can we say? We have to work through all these meridians and channels and pathways. And in that process, we discover false conditioning in ourselves. We discover perhaps traumas in ourselves that we have to work through. We discover relationships with our ancestors. We discover relationships to our community. We discover relationships about true love, about sexuality. We discover how our minds, so we discover all these false ways of thinking and being that need to be undone in order to find this place.
So
the fusion gets that process started off.
Yeah, sorry. So, okay, that's a good qualifier. So
Yeah.
you're saying this whole process of untangling and healing and releasing trauma, all of that really begins with what we understand as Fusion 1, then, is that correct? Yeah, I see. Because when I studied Fusion 1, none of what you're saying was emphasized very much. I didn't hear very much about that.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, you can teach it. I mean, a lot of the teachers, to be honest, they teach it as a technique of feeling the forces and then directing it towards, for example, the lower dantian, middle dantian, or upper dantian.
Yeah.
But there's a deeper layer which I think needs to be discovered. And maybe it's when you go through the higher levels that you understand it. Maybe you don't understand it.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I'm just, you know, as a sort of relationship fanatic. My lights are going on in my head because, you know, the understanding of how we release trauma and conditioning and even ancestral wounding, this is a very hot topic at the moment. It's something that everybody's talking about. And honestly, there's a lot of like very sincere earnestness about the need to do this, but it's not always abundantly clear. You know, there's EMDR, you've probably heard of that.
Yes.
You know, and somatic experiencing, Peter Levine's work. And now there's internal family systems, Richard Schwartz, which has gotten very popular. But, you know, the process of untangling trauma remains a little bit elusive, I would say, within, you know, it's not, yeah.
This is a great topic, really. And maybe we should spend a little bit of time on this.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, as you know, in some respects, people doing meditation work, it's often given as a provider or a relative contraindication that if you've got serious traumas in the past, sexual abuse or traumas, that you have to be very careful about opening yourself up in these sorts of deeper meditations. So it's usually listed as if I can medically say, even though I'm wearing my doubt, it's a sort of a contraindication. And if they do want to enter into that path, then they need the support of all those orthodox systems that you've talked about, all those orthodox therapies that are proved and tried and can assist the person. But perhaps, I can only say perhaps because it's never been tested. I mean, mindfulness has had a lot of research about it, but certainly the Universal Tao hasn't had much research with it. But I would suppose that when the counselor or the person working with this client, that perhaps, you know, working at this deeper level may be a very, very useful adjunct in their recovery.
I think this would be an amazing avenue to pursue. You know, at this point, there are several kind of Bibles have emerged around the topic of trauma, and probably the most referenced is by Bessel van der Kolk, who's a Dutch professor working. I think he's at Boston General. I don't remember exactly, but he's at one of the bigger hospitals in the Northeast. And essentially, he's got this huge book, The Body Keeps the Score. And I mean, really, the book is very accurate about what trauma looks like and how difficult it is to resolve. It's fairly inconclusive about what works best. So, I mean, at the end of the book, I seem to remember right at the end, he said, at that point, he was saying, like, really the best track record is like slow yoga. In other words,
yes, absolutely.
In other words, you don't really, you know, post Freud, we had this idea that you've got to go back into the memory and relive it. And by now, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that's just re-traumatizing. However, there's another leap since that book came out, which is the phenomenal results people get with MDMA, which is a psychedelic. So there was a huge push, actually spearheaded by one of my friends, Rick Doblin, to decriminalize MDMA, make it a Schedule II drug, because it's what the people who do the research, they say in 2 8-hour sessions of MDMA, you can get somebody out of being diagnosable with PTSD to now within the normal range. And there's no
Right.
other therapy anywhere that has ever come close to doing that within
Right.
2 8-hour sessions, So
Right.
there's a big push to decriminalize, and it's gotten stuck a bunch of times. But I think, if the Taoist body of tools actually has effective methodologies that could be applied to trauma, that's something we should definitely be exploring and talking about.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm the authority, but I do know that there is, and this probably has a little bit of a crossover with Chinese medicine. And we've briefly talked about this in our pre-session discussion, but, we did talk about that the belt channels often store previous traumas.
Yeah.
We talked about that the central thrusting channel. These are the ones that we open up in Fusion 2. And then we talked a little bit about the channels and meridians that open up in Fusion 3. But we could say that, as we open up the body in Fusion 2 with the belt channels and thrusting channels, that are we opening up this area for and inviting the participant or the client to negotiate in a supportive environment to work through that so that it can make them functioning again.
Interesting. It'd be very
yeah.
interesting to explore making this an adjunct to other kinds of trauma therapy.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you ask my opinion after being in medicine for over 40 years, I'd say there's never any free lunch.
Yeah.
And I've seen opioids come and go, and now we're seeing a wave with all the cannabinoids and so forth coming and going. And now we're seeing a thing with, the hallucinogenics to help people through their traumas. I think things come and go, and things look like the bee's knees and the panacea at the start, and then we find later on, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
And to me, it's, the age-old philosophy. You've got to work through it slowly. You've got to be supportive. You've got to have the right attitude, and you need time and a little bit of work. But everyone can do that, and you can turn a negative into a positive. Now, that's just my opinion. It's not standard therapy, but I think you've got to be a little bit skeptical. And then you've got this old Taoist system that just says you do your grounding, you do your Tai Chi, you look after your health. You get a supportive community around you. You can have your master or your mentor, and you slowly work through things. There's no free lunch. And that's perhaps what the Taoist system, I think, is. It's about being grounded. It's not rushing it. It's taking it slowly, opening up your body as you're ready to work through issues. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's just think about pragmatically, let's just go back to Fusion 1, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're actually doing, we're learning to form a pakwa where I did all three, so I don't remember which was in which level, but we're forming a pakwa, we're moving these energies of we're moving the fire energy from the heart to above that. We're moving the organ energies relative, and then we're forming a pearl. So, and then I guess you said it's in Fusion 2 that we do the thrusting channel on the left and the right channel, which are incidentally, I think they are one of the 8 extraordinary channels, right? That in Chinese medicine, we're usually getting acupuncture on the 12 ordinary, the yin and yang.
I mean, it depends on the acupuncturist, but most acupuncturists would work on both the organ meridians as well as the 8 extraordinary psychic channels.
So these are examples of psychic channels. Yeah. So, I mean, what in your understanding, if we, if someone learns and practices Fusion 1 and 2 and 3, would you say it's just a matter of slowly and gradually repeating those practices every day, and there will be the kind of psychological healing you're talking about?
Again, every case is different, and I don't want to promise anything at all because I've never I've only experienced it from my students and myself, so I can't really say it offers anything.
Yeah.
But all I can say is that this is mentioned in the traditional Chinese medicine literature. It's mentioned, you'll find it throughout, you'll find it all over the web, but I'm not going to promise it, but I would, for my own, everyone has many traumas in their life. Everyone doesn't go through unstained.
Yeah.
And I've found it useful for myself as a way to slowly work through issues. Now, if it was bigger than that, if I had a counselor, and I think meditation is one of those things that if you go in unguarded and a bit foolhardy, you can upset the balance very quickly.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you perhaps are looking at longer term healing at some psychic bodily level, maybe it offers something that the others don't.
Yeah.
But it's all speculative.
Yeah, so this is like extremely interesting and powerful stuff. It's amazing, actually, that no one has pursued this more, because I'm not a trauma expert. This would have to be somebody else would need to take this on, but it's a very, very potent fusion. Fusion of fusion. That's the wrong word.
Yeah.
It's a very potent blending of methodologies, because trauma healing is really there's an increasing awareness of just how much we all carry,
Yeah, I think if I was standing back and, like I said, watching medicine over the years, I would say this would be an area which you couldn't say was standard care for sure. You could say it possibly, maybe has it got enough evidence to be declared as a useful adjunct? That's what you'd say. But what we're discussing at the moment is for that could be an amazing research opportunity. I mean, the standard care at the moment, of course, as you know, is that people, as far as high-level Taoist practices are concerned, if I can say what my standard is, and probably for others, is that if people have had traumatic histories, I personally won't take them on until I know that they've got a counsellor or a therapist in the background.
Yeah.
And that they've been stable for a while. It's really nice if they're a little bit, sometimes it's nice to know their name, and that if I could ring them if an issue arose. So I think that the standard care would be not to take on trauma victims fresh, but to take on people as an adjunct at the right stage further down the track. And, this is only testimonials, but certainly I've got plenty of students, long-term students that have gone to very high levels that have blessed the practices as saying that this has been so healing from their perspective. And I think to me, it offers a real pathway forward, but that this is all in the realm of speculation. And so maybe the next stage is we could talk about what the Taoist physiology or the Taoist or the traditional Chinese medicine says about these meridians opening up. And we've talked about that the belt channels often can release, and if they're opened and stay open, that often means that they've, in some respects, have resolved some of those traumas. In Fusion 3, which we have the bridge and regulator channels, which is a combination of what we call the yin wei, yang wei, the yin chao and the yang chao, the heel linking vessels. When we open up those yin wei and yang wei channels, that means we've resolved the past, and we learn to act to the past so that we can act in a more spontaneous way with both yin and yang behaviors. Yin behaviors meaning soft, nurturing, being still, comforting. Yang behaviors are making decisions. So that the past no longer rules us and no longer makes an agenda. Because when you have a trauma, theoretically it becomes forefront in the person's mind and in front of their psyche. So the whole world revolves around that artificial center. And from there, what the Chinese system's offering is to, no, that's been put, we've made a new center, which is peace and calm and love and centeredness. It's no longer the trauma is the center. So they don't have to make everything about their life about the trauma. And so they can theoretically function as a stable, centered individual and negotiate the world as a useful, healing, loving human being. So they're the bridge and regulator channels. We've talked a little bit about the everyone's got ancestral issues. Everyone's got skeletons in the closet that have been passed down from mother and father and their mothers and fathers and their brothers and sisters. People don't talk about it. So theoretically, the center of our body, which is the Tai Chi pole, which is the root to all high-level practices, one has to, this is like a rite of passage. We can call these all sorts of rites of passage to become a sage, to become a master or a mistress, or to become a good human being, a perfected human being. And when one opens up the central thrusting channel, there's often issues in the family. And one has to say to oneself, I will pass on humbly and to my best, I will pass on the healing attributes of my lineage. And then I will also say, I'm prepared to be the black sheep and declare that this trait which has gone passed down, whether it be sexual issues, whether it be power issues, whether it be control issues, whether it be aspirations for the things which the earth wants us to do, fame, status, money, all those sorts of things, pursuit of the senses and external. It says, no, this is a time for me, as this incarnation is, for me to theoretically say, no, I'm going to be the black sheep and I'm going to make my life different for here.
Yeah.
And that may heal the family lineage. So that's the central thrusting channel.
Yeah.
So in fusion.
Let me just drop in for a minute. This is, I mean, again, what you're speaking about, I've not actually heard the fusion practices referred to with that emphasis, but there's a massive body of work. Daniel Ford wrote a book called Ancestral Medicine, and there's huge amount of investigation of how do we resolve these patterns that have been passed down generation to generation to generation. And exactly what you're saying, it's interesting that many people come to this conclusion, like at some point somebody makes a decision, the buck stops with me. What has been passed down, it's not going to get passed on to my children. And you could say you become the black sheep. You could also say that you become the white sheep in a family of black sheep,
Right, absolutely.
I mean, or
you they'll see you as the black sheep.
But you become the light-filled sheep in a family of dark sheep, So this is really interesting, and really, I think it would be fascinating to dwell more upon this in future conversations, like how Qigong can have a direct psychic healing impact. But the other thing, you talked about these different traditions, but the question we also have to ask ourselves is, I think, is to what degree do these ancient traditions like Taoism and traditions out of India, to what degree did they have the same kind of intensity of trauma that many people have today? I know that in India, I know people, who are trained in the West, work in India, and they say that the incidence of childhood trauma is much less in India because the family.
I would have thought that it's the story of humanity, so it's been here since the dawn of time.
Could be, yeah, maybe.
But I think, man just repeats its cycles over and over again. But what the Tao theoretically offers us, or what this energetic pathway offers us, is if you do the work, then you won't be blessed with material comforts. You won't be, given back any material rewards, but what you will be given is that channel will open.
Yeah.
And that means, is that theoretically one step closer to inner peace, openness, pathways? I mean, theoretically, what we're trying to do is dissolve the body, right? And we're working out this meridian, by channel. Once we open up all these channels, then the body can dissolve, and then one can start to merge with something greater than oneself. But while one has all these agendas and these blockages, one cannot be at one with everything. And so the sage is theoretically someone who can open up self, completely dissolve oneself, and then enter heaven, or, the congress of heaven and earth, and one can then enter the void. So it's a slow step, and, it takes, I don't want to say this too loud, but it takes years of work. And it's slow and steady and up and down, and you need help along here. I've had lots of counselors over the years and mentors over the years, Yeah.
Well, maybe in the interest of like fitting everything in and into our time, we've at least alluded to what fusion 1, 2, and 3 is about. Let's start to talk now about the Kan and Li. There are 3 levels of Kan and Li: lesser, greater, and greatest. Let's talk about those.
Okay, so these are all, instead of having everything merge via vortex from the 5 elements to yin and yang, and when we do it in fusion, we could say we're merging dirty yin and dirty yang. We could say we're merging, lesser yin and lesser yin and lesser yang. They're not very developed. They're roughly smooth and rough. They're roughly pleasant and unpleasant, right? So now we go on a journey which is sort of similar, but rather than use the power of spinning, if we could say that, we use the power of coupling, self-intercourse. There's lots of metaphors that we use in Kan and Li. Cooking, the dragon and tiger classic, where the dragon and the tiger mate. So there's lots of metaphors that we use, but basically we're doing the same thing again. We're bringing dirty yin and dirty yang, or we could say dirty heaven and dirty earth. We're bringing them together, and we start in the lower part of the central thrusting channel. Here we come back to the central thrusting channel. So if you haven't done the fusion and your central thrusting channel isn't roughly open, then this work is a little bit problematic, right? So we start off in the lower Dantian, which we call lesser Kan and Li. And we marry fire and water, but we could also call that dirty yang, and we could also call that dirty yin, but we could also call that dirty heaven with dirty earth. And we couple that in the lower Dantian. And the aim here is that we bring seemingly irreconcilable opposites, and we bring them together both in a sexual sense. Okay, so there's desire that goes with that, there's orgasm that goes with that, there's love that goes with that, and there's also a philosophy that goes with that, right? So it represents all parts of the human psyche go into this coupling. So we've got...
Let me ask for a clarification for a moment. Like, when you're talking about when you're doing the lesser Kan and Li practice, is sexual arousal involved in
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a desire for the opposite energies in the body to want to, there's a deep, deep desire to find union. There's a deep, deep desire, but now rather than finding it union with another partner, you're finding it union with self, right? And it's not self in, dreams or thoughts or words. This is deep primordial energies you're playing with, yeah? So we marry those in the lower Dantian, and we create, if you use Master Chia's initial way of thinking about it, it's, we bring the fire and the water together, and that creates the steam, and that steam can then open up the body and remove tension and blockages, correct? So from what we're doing here is theoretically learning to marry these two opposite forces, we're purifying the fire, we're purifying the water, we're purifying the yang, we're purifying the yin. And in that process too, we're opening up the body. We're opening up the meridians. We're going deeper into the organs, no longer just smiling it. Now we're cleaning them. And we're cleaning out the emotions. We're bringing out their true nature. And that true nature initially is reported as the virgin child dressed in green, say for the liver. And we've got the primordial instinctive animal, the green dragon, out of the liver. So we're bringing out those energies within ourselves, those sub-personalities, those psychic energies in ourselves that are more pure. They're untainted. They're not contaminated by society, our upbringing, our false education, etc. And then even we go in a bit deeper, when we start to release, we have to bring in the concept of souls and spirits now, right? So the aim of lesser carnally is to really learn to dissolve the body to the next level and release the concept of souls and spirits, which is you can talk about it in any sort of way. You could say the intrapsychic energies that are fundamental to any human being, right? Subpersonality, whatever you want to call it. It's just words. But they're felt as energies rather than just words. So lesser carnally, we work on the lower dantian midway between the navel and the back, and we learn to dissolve the body. And that process can take a while. But then after that, we move the coupling process up into the solar plexus, and we call that greater carnally. And in greater carnally, our objectives are still much the same, right? But now because we've dissolved the body, we're ready now for our mind to go outside the body. And we really start to entertain the possibility of spirit flight, shamanistic journeys. But while we're entangled in traumas and agendas, you just can't do it. The mind just wants to focus on the agenda, so it turns the future into your traumas, it turns the past into your traumas, and it's just no way forward. But the process continues. And can I say, on the background of this, there's another process that's awaiting to happen. And this is very, very interesting because it has lots of relations to other traditions, maybe even particularly, the concept of rebirth in the Christian system. So here what we want to do, once we free all the souls and spirits, theoretically they can merge and become one, right? And that is a sense of rebirth. But the rebirth takes one extra factor according to the Taoist tradition, and that's the reception of the great white light, right? The light from the three pure ones. You could say, if we've made a cross-tradition comparison, that's the great white light from the Holy Spirit. You could call it, the embodiment of the light. But that comes down and that blesses that union of self. It's an amazing rite of passage, right? And I wrote about that in the books that I wrote on greater and greatest carnally within the traditions. So when you do that, that theoretically gives rebirth to oneself. And you might have known in the, I think it was, excuse me for my Christian knowledge, I think it was in John, when Nicodemus is talking to Jesus and he said, how is it that you do the things that you do? And because he does miracles, and Jesus says to him, oh, you have to be reborn again. And Nicodemus says, what? Do I have to go back into my mother's vagina again and be reborn? And he says, no, you have to learn to marry the spirit and the water, or the spirit, fire, and the water. When you learn to do that, then you will gain access to heaven. And then after that, the wind will come and go. So he talks about rebirth being the marriage of spirit and water. In the Tao system, it's a marriage of fire and water, but we do marry, the Shen with the Qing. We've got the Qing, Qi, and Shen. So, it's a marriage of a binary, who knows how it's quoted and lost in translation. But so what we're really after here is a rebirth of self. And we talked about the rites of passage of fusion, about dissolving the body and working through agendas. And now we're talking about rebirth, right? To find your true nature when all your souls and spirits work together as a team. And so that gives rise to the spirit body that can then embark on access to heaven. And if you look at all the Christian mystics, they all theoretically knew how to access heaven. From the Christian mystics to Jesus, they all talked about how do we get access to this realm that all the prophets and the masters have talked about. And so this is theoretically, and this is, it's a life-changing process and a life-changing experience obviously for myself, otherwise I wouldn't have changed my trajectory there. So theoretically, in the background of all these Kananli processes, whether it happens in lesser Kananli, whether it happens in greater Kananli, whether it happens in greatest Kananli, whether it happens in sealing of the five senses, is up to the individual timing, right? There's a famous Taoist Dragon Gate master called Liu Ming, and he talks about really about the host and the guest. And the guest is the spiritual experiences and so forth. And when the host is ready, the guests will, when the temple's ready, the guest will come, the visitors will come. And so we have to keep on building the temple ready so that these entry to heaven can happen. So we keep on working. So Greater Kananli is about that process of rebirth continuing. And then we start to learn how to go on little journeys. We go into little journeys into the earth. We can go journeys on the mid-plane to plants and medicines. And we just get these little extra healing aids that can aid our journey. There's always little bits of psychic healing that we need along the journey. And then we go into, so theoretically in Greater Kananli, we learn to expand our mind as large as we start to get a glimpse that we are actually as large, our mind can be as large as the solar system. So then we start to identify a little bit with, I'm starting to make a really good connection with the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. I look at them and I feel like they're part of me. So there's, I suppose in the, in the Greek pantheon or the Roman mythology, they were important parts of our psyche that we could start to think like a god instead of thinking like a mortal. So then in Greatest Kananli, that goes even further, and we work with the heart, and obviously each of these will uncover, we start to learn about how to use a loving fire, so our heart starts to really grow in the process and gets rid of chains and binds and psychic adhesions around our heart. And we learn to become as large as the universe. And we start connecting with all the constellations. And not only that, the whole premise of Taoist internal alchemy is that when we learn to marry and connect with everything, that's when we can learn to become one. But until we dissolve all of ourselves and understand the whole story of humanity, represented in all the stars and all their stories and myths and legends, that we can't really find the nothingness or the oneness. So there's this journey towards discovery of humanity and all its intricacies and the beauty of existence itself. And so we do that in Greatest Kananli. And then finally, we're in sealing of the senses. This is when we're really learning to gain access to the field, where we're learning to get access to the great thoroughfare into the heavenly realm. And to do that, we work on the third eye cauldron. We work on the tip of the nose cauldron. The tip of the nose is an amazing cauldron where we couple the fire and water here, because if you think about it, when we do these practices, we pucker our lips we bring our nose together, we open up the base of the skull, and really it's like this amazing divine kiss or this amazing divine suckling, which is a very, very primal physiological reflex that we all have. And in that process, you learn to kiss and embrace a sloppy wet kiss with the divine, if you know what I mean. And the third eye opens up with inner vision. And then finally, we bring all the senses together and we merge them in the upper dantian. And when we merge all the senses, they become one. So no longer is our vision separate from our hearing, no longer is it separated from our tactile sense, no longer is it separated from our lips and tongue and our nostrils. Everything becomes one sense, and that gives us access to the field, which then gives us after that we go into, there's a few more cauldrons along the way, like the earth cauldron, the solar system cauldron, one at the North Celestial Pole and South Celestial Pole, but ultimately that gives us entry into heaven. And that's when we do level 8, which is the Congress of Heaven and Earth. And then ultimately from there we go into level 9, which is really starting to now be able to enter the void or the Tao or whatever you want to call it. But then ultimately we have to come back to humanity once more. And that's the whole journey. That's when you come back to the relationships, when you come back to earth, and in your heart is full of so much tenderness and compassion that all you want to do is serve and heal and help others along the way. So that's the whole journey of the whole system. It's a beautiful system. And obviously I've been a big part of that, developing these last couple of levels and putting them in written form with the help of Master Chia. So that's really the whole system in 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So so let me just ask a couple of questions. So first of all, you've referenced parallels in other traditions. And there are many traditions from different geographical areas and different time spans where there's been a similar trajectory towards returning to emptiness. And I'm thinking particularly, for example, of the Dzogchen teachings in Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, So, to what degree is this all climbing the same mountain, and to what degree are there significant differences between?
I think they're probably all the same path. It just depends. You find a teacher that resonates with you. Sometimes people like to eat Chinese food for a few weeks, and other people like Indian food. I think it's up to the same path, and you just find someone that you resonate with that feels that's right for you, right for your soul.
Yeah. Well, I think I told you I've been very immersed in, primarily in Advaita Vedanta, so my teacher was Punjaji, who now sits here, and he was a student of Ramana Maharshi. But I also was very fortunate to get a lot of instruction from Organ Tulku Rinpoche, whose picture I don't see here now. But I got a lot of instructions from Organ Tulku, which is Dzogchen, So as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing kind of parallels, and then I'm also hearing like, oh, but that's different, Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, it's all about coming back, after this big journey, and you come back and you have wonderment for existence. You bring love back to your relationship. You bring wonderment. You bring the joy of just being alive on the earth, but you see it differently.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there's sometimes people use this image of like of a dewdrop dropping into the ocean, and then as it drops, the dewdrop becomes the ocean, and it's the boundaries that defined it as separate are dissolved when it returns home. Yeah. I think one of the I've been quite influenced by these by different traditions, mostly from India and Tibet. for, gosh, I mean, since I was 14. So that's like, it's a long
Mm.
time now, like 50 something years. And the thing that I noticed frequently happened for me and for most of the people I was around is it is actually possible to get into very expansive states that are real, where there's really like you just think of your childhood, it's like it doesn't exist. It's just a thought. It's not there, and your body's full of light, there's no pain anywhere. But then later there's a kind of recognition like that there was some kind of bypassing happened because it wasn't so much that the pain and contraction was cleared. It was just like you went around it and then it has to be
Yep.
integrated later. And this is now, there's a big backlash against this where
Yes.
when these kind of traditions that go around are often now referred to as not trauma informed,
Mm.
because you can use absorption and spaciousness. I've done it a lot in order to avoid feeling,
Mm.
the pain of my mummy doesn't love me, or where's daddy,
Mm.
or don't hurt me, like that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I've explored the Taoist system primarily my whole life, so I can't comment, but I can say I feel that with all the body work that you have to do, that you have to
Yeah.
do all this iron shirt, you have to work on every organ, you have to work on every meridian, that
Mm.
there's no path without every desire, every feeling, every memory, every square millimeter must be involved in the process.
Yeah.
There's no bypassing from my perspective.
Yeah. So that actually does set what you're saying apart
Mm.
from many traditions that go straight for nothingness,
Yep.
and that can be quite effective. I think the other thing I wanted to like maybe finish up our conversation with is to reflect upon the relational impact of all of this, like
Yep.
how if like either if a man and a woman, or if it could be a same-sex relationship, but if two people really go into this together, what might be the relational impact? And if one person goes all the way into this, how would this
Mm.
affect their capacity to have intimate relationship with another? Because that's another big thing at the moment. We talked about trauma, but the other big unresolved conundrum these days is intimate relationship. Everyone's got,
Yeah.
there's a lot of research, a lot of exploration, but no one's really handled it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could say, I mean, I'm writing about it in the books I'm writing about at the moment is, the Taoists talk about, the Shin, or the Shinzai, about emptying the heart. In this process of this going to heaven and the void, you cleanse the heart. And Shinzai is called fasting of the heart. Yen Hui, Confucius's student, often talked about this process, and I'll be writing about this. But you go all the way, and then you come back with this cauldron system, and your heart learns the original love, right?
Good, yeah.
And in this original love, and then we can maybe just talk briefly before we finish, we can talk about, even though it's not really defined in the Tao system, the original sexuality.
Mm.
But we can talk about the basic concept of sexuality become merging with the heart, or merging with the chi and the shen, that it becomes, your sex becomes one piece. It's no longer separate. It doesn't have a desire of itself. Its desire is to be with everything. And so it turns into everything that you do in every way that you meet someone. But with the original heart, you learn to love a person purely to help. You're just celebrating and you're just meeting them. You're just participating in life with them. The agendas are gone. You're
Yeah.
not being operated by, I need someone to love me. I need to prove that I'm terrific. I need this status. The agendas are all have been broken down. All those agendas are broken. So there's some concept of true love there.
Yeah.
And if you love a person with that, maybe, and that's the main, everyone's going to be human and have some taints to it, but that's the one that you mainly participate in.
Yeah.
And so what happens in relationship when you have true love?
Yeah.
I would think it would get better.
Yeah, I
And
guess
then,
we just gotta like, it would be good if we had more test cases to,
yeah,
like, okay, well, here it is successfully being lived. That would be because there's sometimes there's a gap between what is theoretically possible and what is
mm,
actually provable before our eyes. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I suppose that's up to each individual to see if their teacher displays that quality for them.
Yeah.
That's up for them to make that
Well,
subjective
not
call.
only if the teacher displays, but if it's transferable,
Yeah.
because otherwise it could just be the particular character of that teacher. But is it something that can be passed on so it can be duplicated, with intention, So,
Well,
uh,
I think you'd have to trust a lot of the mystics and prophets and so forth and the masters to say, this person knows, I can feel their love.
yeah, yeah, got it.
I
No,
think
I'm
you
talking
can make,
specifically in terms of like intimate relationship, which is
yeah,
something that people are really, there's a lot of exploration now of, yeah, finding true satisfaction and peace and fulfillment in an
yeah,
intimate relationship. So
yeah.
that's generally speaking, I've discovered that is quite a different pursuit than feeling love for all of humanity or feeling the love of
Yeah,
God.
absolutely. You've got
Yeah,
to love a real person with
yeah,
snotty noses, with the
yeah.
fungus between their fourth and fifth toes, who walks in
Oh,
a funny way and has
yeah,
these funny habits.
yeah, yeah. And who may just bring forth from us whatever is not love. I
Yeah,
mean, we're all divine love in theory, but then when the rubber meets the road,
yeah,
it's like, how much are we really living that in an
yeah,
open-hearted way? So this is all beautiful grounds for exploration.
yeah,
This is like life at the what's it called? Life at the frontier.
yeah.
Pioneering.
At the it's at the front end. It's at the where the rubber hits the road. Whatever you want to say.
Yeah,
And then the sexuality in the Taoist sense, it becomes integrated.
yeah,
So it's no longer a drive that needs to necessarily just seek itself, because no longer you fragmented, the head, heart, and loins, or the upper dantian, middle dantian, lower dantian, and sexual center now become one piece.
yeah,
And no matter what you do, it acts as one piece, whether it be in your Tai Chi form, whether it be healing people, whether it be serving humanity, whether it be working for a charity, whether it be creating a piece of art or something. That vitality, it merges with everything that you do, whether it be writing, poetry, whatever. So, and that gets expressed towards your partner
yeah,
as something working towards that vitality, works as one piece. It no longer has to serve itself anymore. And we often talked about, in this high level practices, the three worms, Pung Ju, Pung Ji, Pung Jiao. And their aim is always to make the different centers just seek themselves. So
yeah,
the sexual center just wants sexual desire. It just wants to have sex and express it as a separate part of self. And the heart might also want to be just operate. It just wants to do and rescue and give money away and and then the head just wants to think and please the senses. So we no longer do we have a sense that in the original sexuality, the concept of original sexuality is there is no sexuality, it just becomes vitality, it just animates the whole person.
yeah.
And so, we could spend a whole podcast or two or
Great.
three or four on
Well, we've
that.
done well
Yeah.
today. I think we've done well. And I mean, what I find most exciting about this is where we can explore. I mean,
Mm.
there probably is limited data on this, both in terms of research and in terms of
Sure.
actually people who've done this together as in relationship. But yeah, I think what I'm taking away from today is the very exciting possibilities of bringing Taoist practice specifically to focus on trauma healing. Um, but also how these higher practices can maybe unlock a whole new level of fulfillment in loving relationship. Thanks for taking the time today, Andrew. Really appreciate it a
That's right.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
welcome, Jimmy.
yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully we'll be able to pick some of this up at another time and go into more depth. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina, for having me on your podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.